Aloha everyone, what's going on my dudes? Today is August 9th, 2021. We got another RuneScape update for y'all. To start off this month, we have a fairly large patch week. So without any further ado, let's jump right into the video. Let's go.
Cats is the illest. What you talking about, Willis?
Alright guys, before we look at the patches, I just want to say that we got some more information about the micro-digsite. I'll probably just dedicate a video regarding it tomorrow, but just know that it is aimed to come out on the 16th. This is a micro site, not a full-fledged site, but it is looking to be aimed towards level 60 archaeology. Next up, I want to touch on some Solak changes. So recently they tried to lower the cost of the Grimoire by adding pages to Slayer creatures in the Lost Grove. It didn't have the effect they intended, and they have made the following changes. So Solak will now have a 100% chance to drop torn pages, up from 25. As a result, players will no longer be able to roll a 50% chance to get 2 pages in one drop. And they've added the item Cluster of Torn Grimoire Pages, which essentially is a stack of 25 pages, at a drop rate of 1 in 200 kills. So it's going to be very interesting to see exactly how that's going to affect the prices going forward. Hopefully it gives them the intended result and makes the Grimoire a much more affordable option. So with that out of the way, we're now going to look at those patch notes and see what's been added with today's update. So let's check it out. Starting off, we got the note in front. The drop rate for Narisa's Journal has been increased. Dyed versions of the Fractured Staff of Armadale are no longer tradable. The Pontifex Shadow Ring can now be reclaimed from Azanadra in the Sentistan Cathedral. Attack options are now hidden on Carapac during his death animation to make looting easier. Added a 1.2 second anti-spam to the Warp Time ability to prevent spam clicking from accelerating it. Cooldown indicators on various abilities found in the note in front have been made more opaque for better visibility. Clue scrolls will now drop with the rest of the loot piles in the Carapac encounter. If players attempt to stand beneath Carapac during the shatter mechanic, the time thread tear will now pick a random direction to fire in instead of not firing at all. Added a check to the Carapac magic attack to stop him from dealing damage while he is in the process of dying. The Staff of Armadale special attack is now affected by the Altar of War cooldown reset. The Greater Concentrated Blast ability animation no longer shows the player held in place if they attempt to move while casting. And the following are hot fixed. Since the release of the front, the maximum number of players able to join an instance is now capped correctly. Poison no longer bypasses damage caps when Carapac transitions through phases. The dyed Fractured Staff of Armadale will now retain its dye when transitioning to certain states. Drops from the Nodin will no longer appear under siege engines. Iron Man will now be awarded drops and progress on their Slayer tasks when using siege cannons against the Nodin. The Warp Time ability from the Carapac boss fight will no longer re-trigger upon leaving the instance. The extra damage from Dwarf multi-cannon kits will now be applied after the upgrade has been unlocked. Carapac will now attack straight away after transitioning into phase 4 on hard mode, and can no longer be damaged during phase transitions. The Staff of Armadale special attack no longer gives extra spellcasts via non-ability based critical hits, and Iron Man will now reliably receive loot and XP from Carapac. Moving on, we got some changes to the path system. The activity tracker Archaeology tutorial, the path will now progress as expected. The Breaking the Seal Archaeology mystery achievement is now free to play. Remove the assistant, associate, professor, and guildmaster qualification achievements from the path, and it now completes upon breaking the seal and entering Kared Et. The qualification intern hint trail now leads to acting guildmaster Rainiger instead of the entrance to the Archaeology Guild. The Archaeology path hint trail is now suppressed when following the Archaeology tutorial, which has its own trail. For the activity tracker achievements, they remove the Lumbridge achievement path book. It will return when the path system is rewritten or removed. The Work for Idle Hands achievement now has entries for taking each statuette as well as for delivering them to Xenia. And the Dungeoneering path has been moved from the default path book to the Berthorpe and Taverley path book as it points the player to Taverley docks. Path rewards are now displayed in a central pop-up which also describes the completed path. This will replace the previous pop-up. Certain interfaces are no longer zoomed into full screen on mobile. When on a path containing dialogue choices, the first choice will will be selected by default in cases where the player taps out before making a choice. Clarified and standardized the text for choosing a path in Turiel's dialogue. The leather crafting path no longer requires the player to pick up a cowhide before unlocking it. Improve the user interface tutorial when choosing a path via the I want to choose a different path dialogue. Users will now be forced out of the troll cave if they disable the guidance system during the Morning Star instance. The area outside the Berthorpe troll cave is now a little less gloomy. Your path will no longer clear upon teleporting to Tutorial Island. Should you lose your weapon following the Tutorial Island or Davendale tutorials, you will now be able to claim it back from Turiel. Address several issues during the collections portion of Archaeology's tutorial, which stemmed from collection logs being converted from modal to overlay interfaces. New players are no longer kicked off of the Berthorpe path when they gain a total level over 1000. While on the mining and smithing path, players will now be directed back to the Berthorpe mine if they create the wrong item. Prevented dwarfweed incense sticks from transporting items to your bank while in an item restricted area. Moving on to the environment changes, they have added new lighting in Sitharid Abbey's cellar. A variety of rocks and pillars in Letya have been made more solid and can now no longer be walked through. A ladder tile in the outpost north of West Ardoyne is no longer visually blocked by ground decorations. A section of the fence in East Farrock has been updated to match other fences. Wooden props in Berthorpe Castle now fit snugly against the wall. A rock blocking access to a source of the Rogue's Purse herb has been removed. You may no longer walk into and hide inside the rocks near the ruined temple agility course, and they've updated the cube maps for Shadow World maps to increase realism on certain materials. Next up, we got some mobile changes. Added a scenery border for the first cutscene in the Hunt of Surak mini quest, as well as to the tower scene during Grim Tales, and they have fixed a specific black screen issue at the start of the Hunt of Surak cutscenes. Lastly, we got other random changes and improvements. Withdrawing materials from the metal bank in the wilderness will now trigger a warning informing players that will not be possible to deposit them again during combat in the wilderness. Added a left click option to fix the light in the lighthouse during Horror from the Deep. Text in the pet's wardrobe interface has been made brighter and easier to read. The beach has finally been removed at the Lumbridge crater. Fixed a typo associated with the Traherne pickaxe override. Reverted some chat message spacing changes. Stephanie the Seagull's pet icon in the player-owned house menagerie now displays her instead of a yak. The use all function now works correctly across XP items in free-to-play. You must now bow to Yuri in order to speak to him when completing medium clue scrolls. Pets unchecked outside the player-owned house are now properly removed from the menagerie. Those added to the menagerie from the backpack are now properly stored and displayed in the player-owned house after leaving and re-entering it. The full Slayer helmet's wear and activate options now work correctly. When hatching multiple eggs, you will now collect the correct hatchlings from each incubator. Dr. Nabanik's I want to talk about mysteries dialogue option now works correctly. In progress urns can no longer be stored in invention machine inventories. The Make X interface for fletching ogre bows now states that Grish the shaman must teach you how to make one. An info option has been added to close doors in dungeoneering. When used, you'll receive a message for the type of key your party needs to progress further in the dungeon and whether you already have that key required. Portents of Restoration are now correctly consumed when players' HP drops below 50% after standing on the Grave Creeper's poison pool. Characters and objects will no longer float in the deep sea fishing hub. Presumably this does not affect fish. The correct player will now receive XP when assisting in the creation of Primal Extract. Implings can no longer fly into towers through walls and closed doors near the Imperial District in Manifos. The Thaler shop no longer deducts currency if a purchase fails due to a full backpack. Upon using the Luminite injector, all the forges and furnaces in the area will now change color from orange to blue as expected. The slow-mo walk override will now consistently display your worn main hand and offhand items. Fixed a blocking issue with Trindy and Ollie the Wise at the Archaeology Guild. The Greater Fury ability will now work in PvP encounters. Skeletons spawned during the Terraket boss fight will now trigger the Ruthless perk if killed by a player. The latest fruit trees will no longer give players double XP when the farming skill cape is equipped. Using the Reaper portal while on a care pack task will now correctly teleport players to the Colosseum gateway. And finally, melee area effect abilities will now correctly hit NPCs larger than 5x5 squares when attacking them away from the southwestern corner of the NPC's hitbox. That is it for your patch notes. Links and everything discussed in this video will be down in the description below. Head on over there to check them out if you wish to do so. With that, I'm going to wrap up the video. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button. If you're not subscribed yet and you want to stay up to date on all things RuneScape related, then hit that subscribe button. Anyways, I appreciate you watching. I'm out. Aloha.